Okay, good morning, everybody. If I could ask you all to put your phones or iPads or computers on mute, unless you're speaking, it'll help limit the background noise. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes meeting of December 7th, 2020. I will move them. Matt will second them. Any comments, revisions, additions? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We'll go right to the chair's report. Mine will be very brief because we got a neat agenda today with updates from others. Like I always do, I'll just a COVID update from the control room. We're in February now, and we're not out of the woods yet. Startling number is Suffolk County's infection rate is twice as high as Manhattan. Go figure. Long Island is still the highest infection rate in New York State as a region. So we are not out of the woods yet. Who knows what yesterday's Super Bowl may trigger in terms of further, impacts, 10 days, 14 days down the road. Hopefully most people were smart, but we're certainly not out of the woods yet. I think, the vaccination rollout is getting better. We'll be hearing more, I guess, from the team on that. And as the governor says, as the supply increases, we certainly have enough distribution sites to start getting people more getting them vaccinated. Really, it's a supply issue now. So we still have a long way to go, but I am still optimistic. We got to get through February, a little bit of March. And before you know it, we can now say next month is spring. The warmer weather will start coming. Golf courses will open. Outdoor dinings will resume. And, things are going to get better. So we just got to get through the next 6 weeks and be smart. The LIA issued our 2021 priorities 2 weeks ago, and happy to share that I coordinated with Judy and Mike Aarons from the Stony Brook team, and we included some things that are important to Stony Brook in the LIA's priorities, and happy to always support Stony Brook as the economic engine that it is in our region, and it's the largest single site employer. It's the largest business in Suffolk County, and sometimes we forget that, and Stony Brook needs to also view itself as one of the largest businesses on Long Island, in addition to all the other great things it's known for. So happy to do that. And, we all wish 2020, couldn't be gone fast enough. Who would have thought 2021 would have started the way it did? But without dwelling on the negatives, in terms of some of the positives that occurred, certainly having a president that believes in research and science and believes in investments in research should eventually bode well for Stony Brook. And the fact that the federal, stimulus package in some form is likely, and that it will likely bring some state aid to the state. That should also eventually be good news for Stony Brook in terms of less pain from Albany. And so I guess we'll get more of an update from that from Judy. But definitely excited about the future, despite the way the year started off with the craziness in Washington and the disgraceful craziness in Washington. So with that, Maury, I'd like to hand it over to our president for the president's report.
Well, thank you, Kevin, and good morning, everybody, on this yet again snowy Monday. An absolutely beautiful morning driving in, the way the snow clung to each and every branch of every bush and tree. It was really quite lovely. And the teams at Stony Brook have done an amazing job, both in the last snowstorm and in this one, making sure that access to the hospital remains open. Today, also the vaccination site, and of course, the rest of the university campus. They really did an amazing job. And I have to say, I think even significantly better than Suffolk County. So let me get to some updates. I know that you all have my written report, but I'd like to highlight a few things. You're going to hear later from both Peg McGovern and Carol Gomes more specifically on our COVID responses. But what they will not do is sing their praises. And so that is what I get to do this morning. My team, my COVID response team, really led by Carol Gomes and Peg McGovern and Larry Zacharies, have not only kept our community safe, and we'll talk about some more of those details about our students returning to campus, but very specifically have also led a major effort partnering with the state on vaccination efforts. And it is really so rewarding, I know, for everybody on the team to be able to play the role that we are playing in helping to vaccinate Long Island. And they have really been tireless in their efforts, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, operating one of the state Department of Health pods, which is being run out of our Research and Development Park, as well as many other pods that we have been running in order to ensure that we get vaccinations into our healthcare workers, have been able to do some for the faculty who are teaching in our classrooms this semester, and serving many other parts of Long Island. It's really been a heroic effort, and I am enormously proud of our team. And I know that they will play down their own efforts and roles in this. So when you do hear their updates, please know what an extraordinary effort the team has put into this. And that includes dozens and dozens and dozens of people who are working so hard in order to serve our communities, and I couldn't be prouder. Spring semester has begun, started a little bit late because of that blizzard last week, although most of our students were on campus for that. Because prior to arriving, some of them actually had to come a little bit early in order to quarantine. They were all expected to arrive with a negative PCR test. We immediately began our surveillance testing once they were on campus. We are testing our residential students twice a week. And we are testing our commuter students, faculty, and staff once a week. And so that means we're doing many thousands of tests a week. And if you looked at our numbers last semester, we were significantly lower, remaining well below 1%. All of last semester, lower than the cases in the rest of Suffolk County. And as Kevin said, Suffolk County remains a worrisome hotspot in the state, but we are certainly not seeing those same levels among our students, faculty, and staff. So it is proving once again that the protocols we have in place in campus and our community are doing such a great job of following the guidelines and caring not only for their own individual health, but for the health of their community. We will obviously continue to follow all guidelines, and it will, look a lot like the fall semester. We have about 4,800 residential students, which is similar to where we were last semester. Judy's going to be giving you a lot more details about the ongoing legislative session. But again, I want to highlight a few things. And the most important of that is how appreciative we are of the partnership of the chancellor, who really understands and values the contributions that the research universities make to the Suny system, understands how important it is to Suny to have institutions who are furthering both the research and the economic development agenda in the state of New York. We've had great conversations with Buffalo, the other AAU institution in Suny, as well as the other two U centers, Binghamton and Albany. And for the first time, we have recognition in the governor's legislative budget that it does cost more in order to run a vibrant research university than the others. That means that in the governor's legislative agenda, there is a recognition for the ability for the youth centers and the other doctoral granting institutions to be able to charge a tuition that is different from that which would be charged at the comprehensive and the other institutions. So we are enormously appreciative of that support from the chancellor, from the governor, and we are working very hard with our legislative delegations and other supporters in the legislature to help them understand what this means. Our top priority, if that is to occur, it is to ensure that we continue to package our Pell and TAP students at the same levels they're getting packaged now, meaning that rise in tuition costs would not be felt by any of those students. And that remains a very high priority for us to be able to support our students from lower socioeconomic realms to ensure that they can continue to come to Stony Brook, graduate, and go on to lead great lives and careers. And Judy will give you more details on all of that. I hope you will have noticed in my update that we recently announced the individual who will be our next provost. Paul Goldbart will join us at the end of March as Executive Vice President and Provost. He is currently Dean of Natural Sciences at the University of Texas in Austin, the largest college at UT Austin with more than 12,000 students, about 500 faculty, and really one of the most important colleges at UT. Prior to that, he was Dean of Sciences at Georgia Tech, and he spent most of his faculty career at the University of Illinois. He is a renowned physicist. He focuses on particularly areas of quantum materials and soft condensed matter. And I know that when you all get a chance to meet him, that you will love working with him. Paul is really one of the most thoughtful leaders I've encountered in my time in higher ed, a deep and passionate commitment for the role of public higher education, both really a student advocate and a faculty advocate, understanding how to build teams and collaborative and collegial environments where everyone is able to be successful, to be their best, and to do the kind of research that really makes a difference in the world. And so I know that you will all enjoy meeting Paul, and maybe at our next council meeting, we can feature him a little bit so that you all will get a chance to get to know him. We have another search that is underway, and that is for our Vice President for Advancement. We've been so appreciative of Deborah Lowen-Klein, who was willing to step into this role for this year. And it was time to get that search underway. Deborah's been such a great partner in this, and we're very appreciative. And that search has commenced. The search committee's been named. The firm has been hired. And probably later this spring, I'll be able to report on that. Let me talk to you a little bit about Stony Brook Medicine. And first want to begin with this council, thanking Dr. Ken Kashansky for his more than decade of really impactful leadership for Stony Brook Medicine. Many of you can see the incredible impact that Ken has had in his decade of leadership, bringing together and really building the impact of Stony Brook Medicine in the way that it serves this community and providing healthcare for Long Island, growing the clinical enterprise, strengthening the quality of work at the hospital, continuing to be focused on the research that our faculty do, and this portfolio that he runs has grown so enormously in the past decade. Because of that, I've decided that as Ken transitions out of the role, that for future, we will be splitting that role. And in order to help us through that transition, I announced that Bill Wertheim, Dr. Bill Wertheim, who's joining us on this call. So Bill, if you could kind of wave so everybody can see you. He began his role as the interim dean for the Renaissance School of Medicine on February 1st. Bill is a really thoughtful and committed leader who's agreed to serve in this capacity as we make it through this transition. Bill is a longtime faculty member in the Renaissance School of Medicine, serving most recently as our head of graduate medical education, meaning working particularly closely on our residence and fellowships programs. And I'm so appreciative of his willingness to step in this role. I will keep these roles split for the foreseeable future. We will immediately begin the search for the next senior vice president for the health systems. That search, we're finalizing the selection of the search firm and finalizing the appointment of that committee. And all of that will be announced soon. These are two really big jobs. And we're just at a moment where I believe that will be the right structure for our academic medical center. It's, really clear it's about 50-50 the ways that academic medical centers structure this, whether that is a joined position or a split position. There's no perfect structure. I just think we are at a moment in some of the strategic things that Ken has put in place under his leadership, the growth of the clinically integrated network, which is really key to our clinical success for the future, as well as the work that we want to continue doing, emphasizing the growth of research in the Renaissance School of Medicine. And so I just think for our moment, it is time for those roles to be split. So launching the search for the senior vice president, a search we hope to have concluded and a new person here by this summer. And then once that person is here, we will launch the search for the next permanent dean for the Renaissance School of Medicine. Another change that I have made structurally is that I am having all of the schools, including the health science schools, report to the provost, beginning once Paul joins us at the end of March, in large part because of what I've been hearing from this community since before I even came, which is the important ways that we need to be working together more collaboratively as one Stony Brook University. And that will be greatly enhanced by having all of our deans working in partnership with one academic lead, so that we have one person who's really working together with our academic leaders to figure out those points of connection, of overlap, of collaboration, bringing our strengths together so that we will be even stronger than just our individual units. So I'm very much looking forward to moving forward with how we continue to build a stronger Stony Brook University by bringing us all together. Last meeting, we talked about the work of the Strategic Budget Initiative. Just a very quick update that work continues. Really hundreds and hundreds of faculty and staff who are engaged in this process. Really great ideas coming forward about ways that we can operate more efficiently, that we can come together to work on new ideas for how we generate additional revenue for Stony Brook, and how we just work together in ways that demonstrate that and that leverage the power of being one university. Very recently, we've held 5 town halls highlighting the work of each of the 5 committees, and each one of those calls had hundreds of people in attendance. And we are, turning each one of those sort of live presentations into videos that will live on the internet so that anybody who wishes to watch them can. We will be receiving recommendations later in the spring from this process, and we will certainly update you where all of that stands later in the year. In terms of events, it's a busy month on campus. This is Black History Month, and we have lots of events ongoing in recognition of that, as well as the Stoller Center continues to have a robust lineup of available streaming things that each of you can access, whether it's the film series or other things. And I hope many of you will stay engaged with us through that. With that, I'm certainly happy to take questions, Kevin, and before moving forward with the agenda. So just let me know.
Great. Thank you, Maury. Terrific report. Yeah, I have a couple of comments or observations. One, congratulations on finding Paul. I had the pleasure of meeting him a month or two ago, and he does seem terrific, and he should be a terrific provost. And I think your idea of helping to integrate the Health Science Center part of the campus with the main campus with the reports directly to Paul will be well received. And I know you often told me, and I'd like to thank him as well. Fotis did a great job stepping up as interim, and I guess he'll continue to be interim until Paul arrives. So thank you, Fotis. Ken and I joined about the same time. I joined in 2009 as the council chair. I think it was 9, could have been 8, but I think it was 9. And soon thereafter, Ken joined us. Ken, I want to thank you as well. For everything you've done for the university. And for me personally, when my body was falling apart 3 years ago between my neck and my arm and my hand, I was always picking up the phone and calling up Ken for a referral for a Stony Brook expert. And Ken always said he was happy to take our money. And so, and he always gave me a good referral. And so Ken, thank you for that as well. Welcome, Bill. I'm not sure if we met, but look forward to meeting you, and thanks for stepping up as the interim dean. And, it's just, Maury, it seems exciting. The team you're building, the way you're restructuring things, listening to all the feedback from all the different stakeholders. It sounds like you're doing a lot of things, in the right way and a very strategic and methodical way. So well done. I'll open it up to any of the other council members who may have any comments or questions? Hearing none. I had one question for you, Maury. In terms of athletics, do we envision, I see Stony Brook men's basketball is starting up again on campus. Do we envision fans being allowed in some type of limited capacity like other stadiums are experimenting with, including the Buffalo Bills, upstate? Any chance of that happening this semester, or is it unlikely?
We certainly are hopeful that might be possible, especially with our outdoor sports. So many of you, I don't know if you know this or not, but since our fall sports were put on hold, those sports are all planning to play, provided we're able to keep infection rates low in the spring. So a shortened football season, lacrosse season, soccer season, all of that kind of happening simultaneously in the spring. And since those are outdoors, it might be possible that some of those would allow fans. But of course, we're going to be working in close partnership, obviously, with our athletic associations and for their guidelines, but most importantly with the state and their guidelines on that matter as well. So I'd say at this moment, that is still an open question as to whether or not that is going to be possible. Both men's and women's basketball are going, and both are playing strong and having really strong seasons. And there is a plan for a tournament and hopefully for a championship team from the American East to be able to join the NCAA tournament, which each one is, instead of doing its normal, where you had sort of regional events taking place on home courts, all of the men's is going to happen in Indianapolis and all of the women's is going to happen in San Antonio. And they have very strict protocols in place to ensure or to do their best to try to ensure very low infection rates. We test our athletes 3 times a week currently, so even stricter protocols than what we're doing for the rest of campus. We once had like a single positive case and had to go on a very brief pause way back in December, but our teams have been healthy. Our protocols are strong. And it's really exciting. So even though we can't be there, it would be great to have people, watching the live stream, and the teams are doing great. I did get to go to one of the games. I was the sole individual in the stands. Very sad and very weird to be in this huge arena that I know should be filled with fans cheering on our teams. And it's very cavernous. And I know that's hard on our teams, that, much of their energy certainly comes from fans in the stands, but they're so happy to be able to be playing even under these very odd circumstances.
Oh, well, great to hear. Great to hear. And one last question. I noticed in your report, and not surprisingly, that our international enrollment is way down, partly because of COVID, partly because of the prior federal administration's immigration policies. Without being partisan, are we optimistic under President Biden that both with his immigration policies and his taking the COVID seriously, that do we anticipate international enrollment going back up for the fall semester?
Great question. I'm not sure optimism is what we should have for next year. The timing of their decisions about applying mostly were about the fall, right? So the timing didn't really work in such a way that I think we might have seen whether or not it is going to return. I think international enrollment throughout the US, we're not the only school by any means seeing significantly diminished numbers. I think it's going to take years to rebuild that trust. There are many international students who are just looking at the events of the last 4 years and asking themselves, do I want to take that chance? Or would I be better off either staying home and studying, or studying in Europe, or studying in Australia or New Zealand, or somewhere else in the world? So everybody is still seeing significantly reduced numbers of applications from international students, especially those from China. We've yet to see exactly where Biden's policies and the sort of attitude towards international students, and then their also ability to remain afterwards, that's not really firmed up yet. So we're going to have to watch that. Meanwhile, we are working very hard not only to maintain the relationships we already have, but to significantly expand our relationships elsewhere in the world as well, so that we have a broader approach to recruiting both international students and other out-of-state students in the US. I do think there is more work we could be doing there as well. So we're trying to make our approach a little bit more varied, perhaps, than it's been in the past. But our numbers will still be down next fall.
Got it. Thank you for that. And just Rachel, let the minutes reflect that at the end of my chair's report and before Maury started her president's report, we were joined by Linda Arman, council member. So welcome, Linda. I'll now hand it over to Judy Griman for an executive budget update.
Glad I went over to your
and unmuted. Okay, thank you, Kevin. And it looks like Mike Smith has also joined us for the minutes. I will give a brief report. We're at that moment in the year when the governor's budget, the governor's done a proposed budget, and now the legislature gets to play with that and look through it. The good news is, so the proposed budget really looks at the long-term financial impacts of COVID-19 on New York State. And frankly, those long-term impacts, there's about a $15 billion for this year and next, but then it grows to about a $34 billion impact over the next 3 years. This is not a state budget that will turn around quickly in terms of the problems that have been sort of brought to the state from COVID. For Suny, we actually, it's a pretty good budget. So Suny was told to expect a system-wide about $300 to $400 million cut, but that's been reduced to about $69 million cut. Nobody wants a cut, but I'd rather have a $69 million cut than that much greater cut. This cut level, though, is of course dependent on New York State getting $6 billion, excuse me, from the federal budget. So the governor constructed the budget based on that we would get $6 billion from the federal budget. Obviously, if there's less, the budget will need to be adjusted, and if there's more from the federal government, the budget will need to be adjusted in a more positive way. The proposal actually gives the chancellor some flexibility in terms of how he would manage any reductions to Suny. So often it's just been sort of an across the board cut. He has told us many times that he doesn't like that approach, and the governor's proposal allows something different than that. Suny also got, in many respects, sort of a lesser cut than many agencies, and that's great for now. I think that legislators will look to increase that cut to even things out for the others. I hope not, but that will be out there. Some of the just highlights for us, the governor has proposed keeping all tuition assistance, TAP, Excelsior, and opportunity programs held harmless. Often there was kind of an every year dance where the governor would propose cutting EOP, and then the legislature would put that money back. And so a lot of time would be spent on lobbying that. He's held EOP harmless. He put in, as many of you know, there was a 5-year SUNY 2020 predictable tuition plan. There was a year of no tuition plan. Then there's been 4 years of another predictable or rational tuition plan that had up to $200 of an increase. So he included that extension through 24-25, allowing for a maximum increase of $200 per year. And it includes the same maintenance of effort language that's been included, again, going all the way back to SUNY 2020, that essentially says you can't cut. New York used to be in the situation where they would get a tuition increase and then they would get a cut, so you'd never get ahead. And the maintenance of effort says you can't do that. The most important thing for Stony Brook, and as Mari alluded to, is that the governor includes flexibility in setting tuition rate categories for the university centers and other doctoral degree granting institutions. This is huge. It's really the first time that this difference in how these institutions are run, in what it takes to run a research institution, is recognized. And it's lovely to be recognized by the governor and by the chancellor. The chancellor has worked very hard on this. I think he has signaled to us from the very beginning, and he's had a great partnership with Mari and with the president of UB and the other U Center presidents to really come to understand what it takes. And so that's included in there. Another big one, actually for all of higher ed, but it impacts us, is he proposes streamlining the approval process for new programs. Currently, it's a very regulated, elaborate process that goes through SUNY and goes to the State Department of Ed, and he has proposed making a change to that. Colleges and universities across the state have been asking for this for years, and I think that this was really positively received by everybody, except maybe some people in the State Department of Ed, but I think that, really positively received. He's continued funding for Clean Water Technology Center at Stony Brook. Two of the cuts that I will call attention to, one is a cut to the small business development centers across SUNY, and the other is, as some of you may remember, there's been sort of back and forth on the centers of excellence and the centers of advanced technology. This has gone on actually for the last few years. It's been something where, again, the governor would tend to propose cutting them. There would be a lot of lobbying. The legislature would restore the funds. Last year, the governor proposed, last year or the year before, the governor proposed merging them and cutting the number. That didn't pass. But this year, he's decreased funding a bit. And then he has proposed that centers of excellence would be eliminated by April 2023. Current ones would be extended for a period of 2 years. And they would then have the chance to become centers for advanced technology. Why does this matter at Stony Brook? We have CWIT and AirTech. So one is an advanced energy center, the other is a Center for Wireless Technologies. And so again, the CAT COE community is working hard on this. We are following Suny's lead on this, and we'll see where that goes. Again, he built in some time, so nothing would even if the legislation passed as it's written, nothing would happen immediately. He built in some time. On the capital side, there's really no difference from the last couple of years, which is Suny got about a $550 million allocation for critical maintenance. The bulk of that money goes directly to Suny, which then goes out to campuses. Stony Brook got about 24 million, which is about what we've been getting for all facilities. And the Stony Brook University Hospital got an additional $50 million allocation. In other words, you're able to spend it, but the budget still doesn't pick up the debt service. So the hospital is one of the SUNY hospitals are the only buildings that the state owns that the state doesn't pick up the debt service. And so we've been working on that for a while. I know Senator Stavisky, who chairs the Higher Ed Committee in the Senate, is quite interested in having the state pick up that debt service. So we'll keep working on that. From a process perspective, the Senate and the Assembly released their one-house budgets and alternative budget proposals in about mid-March. And a budget's due by the end of March, by March 31st, before the start of the state's fiscal year. The other thing I just want to talk briefly about is at the federal level, COVID relief is obviously much in play. The House has approved a budget resolution. The Senate approved a budget measure last week to move forward with reconciliation. The Senate, we've been working very closely with the higher ed associations on advocacy efforts. The goal has been to have Congress include about $26 billion for research and $97 billion for higher education. In the current form, they have about $35 billion for higher ed and no direct research relief funding. So that, work will continue. Leader Schumer and the New York congressional delegation are well aware of our community's request. And we're hoping to get some more money in the COVID relief. But the last thing I would say is that for federal funding for FY22, on the federal appropriations, we are expecting to see increased research funding and higher education funding. The president has talked about that. Key leaders in the Senate have talked about that, and AAU is currently predicting that we'll absolutely see increases in higher ed and research funding. So that's, and then the last thing I would note is that Schumer has something called the Endless Frontiers Act. This is sort of transformative legislation that would fund research technology transfer and workforce at really huge levels of over $100 billion over 5 years, would create a new technology directorate and at the NSF, would create some regional technology hubs. And we've already been in conversation with, all of our partners, BNL, the Flatiron Institute, other New York State research universities. This would be great to put in a proposal should this get passed. The thing I would caution, however, is this is a huge bill. 100 billion is a very large bill on the heels of COVID relief bills. So we'll see if Leader Schumer can get that passed. So that's kind of the quickest down and dirty on what's happening at both state and federal. Are there any questions?
Great. Thanks so much, Judy. And yes, I think this year more than ever, what happens in Albany largely depends on what happens in Washington. So we need to see first what happens there, and that's going to impact, what happens in Albany. So, thanks for that update. Any questions from the council members for Judy? Not hearing any. And I'd just like to sensitize Maury, your leadership team on another very important Albany issue. And I've been on the phone with folks in Albany on this matter as well. It's sort of very easy, sexy to talk about, let's raise taxes on millionaires. And not that I'm one, so I don't have a vested interest in this, but there are many in the legislature, regardless of what happens in Washington, meaning even if the governor gets all the money he's asking for from Washington, there are many who want to increase taxes on the wealthy here in New York, almost as a badge of honor. So they could claim that New York State has the highest personal income tax. And so even if it's not needed. And what we need to be concerned about is 1% of New Yorkers contribute 40 to 45% of all revenues to New York State collected by the personal income tax. And they're very mobile these days. And if we continue, if their taxes increase and then compounded by New York City income tax increases, we will indeed, accelerate the exodus of a lot of wealthy New Yorkers, which means in turn could be more cuts or more tax increases for regular folks. So again, it sounds like it probably polls well. Yeah, sure, we should tax all the millionaires, but we need to be concerned about chasing people out of our state because again, 1% of New Yorkers pay 40 to 45% of all revenues collected by the New York State income tax. So I just share that fun fact with you. Hearing no other questions for Judy, we'll now head up to the COVID-19 update from Carol Gomes and Dr. Margaret McGovern. Who wants to go first?
Carol will go first. I will go
Hi,
first.
Carol.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present and provide an update on COVID activities at Stony Brook Medicine. When I last addressed this forum, it was in the midst of the first surge of the pandemic, with limited discussion around the availability of the COVID-19 vaccine. But as a result of decisions made in early 2020 to plan and execute the build of an oxygen tank farm, to continually exercise best practices relating to supply chain practices, to secure PPE, and I know that that had been a great topic during the first surge, and also to retrofit dozens of patient care rooms with negative pressure systems, and to continually provide updated patient guidelines and protocols to care for COVID patients. It's really paved the way for Stony Brook Medicine to successfully manage not only the first surge, but the second wave of the pandemic as the holidays came upon us at the end of 2020 and the COVID census began to grow. So here we are now in 2021, and we're actively immunizing our staff and the community, working to reduce the spread of the virus by flattening the curve. And Dr. McGovern will give you an overview of the current status of the planning around the vaccination pods and the various activities associated with those. But it's really been a tremendous effort and team spirit, as President McInnes was relating earlier in the presentations. So we will be sharing an update on those activities in a few moments, but I'm focusing more on the surge and flex plans, which you've also heard about before. There are significant differences between the first and the second surge. During the first surge, there were limitations to performing elective procedures and surgeries, which we had previously spoken about. However, telehealth capabilities were considerably expanded during that first surge. And during the second surge, It's been a bit of a different experience in that the hospital has been able to maintain the necessary capacity requirements to ensure a safe patient care environment with opportunity to flex and expand as patient volume grows. We've been successfully redeploying staff as needed with the ability to perform many elective procedures as staffing and space permits. We still enjoy the opportunity to be able to use expansion units that had been vacated when we moved into the MART and the hospital pavilion the previous November. In terms of PPE, all three of our hospitals have been able to amass substantial PPE supplies in order to meet and exceed New York State requirements. In addition, we continue to focus on the well-being of our staff and faculty to create safe spaces such as Resilience at the Brook, which is a beautiful location located in our Brook hallway between the hospital pavilion and the existing towers. And this resource actually provides counseling, pet therapy, meditation, aromatherapy, and all other types of services for our team members to support them during difficult times. Additionally, Stony Brook Medicine has leveraged all of its hospitals within the system to perform what we call load balancing by transferring patients between Stony Brook University Hospital, Stony Brook Southampton Hospital, and Stony Brook Eastern Long Island Hospital. And this has allowed us to optimize hospital capacity and to maintain as normal an elective procedure schedule as possible. The key to success is heavy reliance on frequent communications on a daily basis with patient throughput coordinators, senior leadership from all of the hospitals, and we continually track and monitor patient movement and throughput throughout the system using daily huddles and our centralized throughput office that has multiple sources of data available to it. We also utilize very sophisticated data analytics for predictive modeling, which allows us to plan while continually monitoring emergency department activities, patient admissions, discharge tracking, operating room, and recovery room flow. And we're also required to share many different types of data sets with a variety of state entities, which we report again on a daily basis, including weekends and holidays. And this allows other governmental agencies to understand what's happening, not only in the county, but in the state, to understand patterns so that we can plan better in terms of the use of our resources and modify plans as needed. In addition, the hospital works lockstep with Stony Brook University. And I just want to say that this is really an alignment with the concept of the model establishing one university, as we greatly appreciate President McGinnis's continued leadership and support, as well as our strong partners in this entire effort. Judy Greiman and Larry Zacharies have been tremendous assets to our operational and logistical planning processes. So I just wanted to provide a special thanks to all of them. In addition, we also work closely with Suny and the various hospital associations, such as the Greater New York Hospital Association and the Hospital Association of New York State, to coordinate efforts and resources. We participate on several calls, many of them daily, to ensure, again, that we're all working together in the region to provide the best resource possible for our patients and for our staff as well. So in summary, Stony Brook Medicine has successfully managed patient surges, flexing resources appropriately to accommodate needs while adequately maintaining capacity requirements, and truly by load balancing, actively load balancing in our health system to shift appropriate patients between hospitals and implementing continually revised patient protocols, working with our physicians and our team. We optimize care for our patients, and we've been able to achieve desired outcomes. I also want to thank our entire healthcare team for their perseverance and dedication to our patients, the community, and each other, as without them, we would really not be able to establish the success that we have over the last year or so. And at this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Margaret McGovern, who has been shepherding the vaccination pod process for Stony Brook Medicine and has also been a staunch leader during this entire effort. So Dr. McGovern.
You're muted, Peg.
I'm the Dean for Clinical Affairs in the School of Medicine and Vice President for Clinical Programs and Strategy for the health system. And as Carol notes, I've been helping to provide some leadership for our vaccine efforts. And Stony Brook has been involved in vaccination in 3 different programs. One is that our 3 hospitals receive weekly allocations of vaccine from the state. And those allocations are to be prioritized to vaccinate our phase 1L, phase 1A patient-facing healthcare workers. So this is week 9 of the vaccination program. We've been at this for a little bit over 2 months. And it is the intention that those vaccines get into our patient-facing healthcare providers. At Stony Brook University Hospital, to date, we've vaccinated 76% of our patient-facing staff. This week, we have a multifaceted program to reach out to those staff members that have not taken up the opportunity to be vaccinated, to offer them an opportunity again this week, provide education sessions for those who have additional questions about vaccine, and try to address some of the hesitancy we see in certain segments of the workforce. So this program is entirely stipulated by the state, how many doses a hospital gets, what they can be used for, and there's a whole variety of rules around the use of these vaccines that are codified in an MOU that's signed by the hospital CEO. So that program has been continuing for each of the 9 weeks. We've made great progress in these initiatives, and we hold these points of distributions, or so-called pods, at Stony Brook University Hospital. The second program we're involved in, and this is really a university-wide initiative, is partnering with the Department of Health to host one of their community-facing pods. This is being held in our R&D park in 1500 Stony Brook Road. This pod operates 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and is designed to serve other eligible groups other than the phase 1A workers. So all of those in the phase 1B and those age 65 and over. So this program is entirely staffed by Stony Brook Medicine and Stony Brook University, but the vaccine is received from the state. And as with the hospital program, they have the entire authority to stipulate how that vaccine is used. We started out that program on January 18th, doing 500 doses a day. That allocation has been increased to about 750 doses a day. And as everyone has pointed out, as vaccine supply increases, the state intention is that that program will grow even bigger in the R&D park. And we do have the capacity and ability, both facility-wise and staffing-wise, to scale that up as the state requests. Today actually is the first day that we're doing second doses in that pod. So 3 weeks ago, people got their first dose. So today's the first day that we're seeing both first and second dose patients coming through to receive their vaccination. So I have to say, this is a finely oiled machine. We have a great team performing all this function. Larry's been an incredible resource helping us with all the security and logistical issues of using that space safely. And we get frequent unsolicited, emails and letters from people who've gone through that site saying how well it works, how they expected to come there and it was going to be difficult and chaotic. And they're just very impressed at how well run this site is. And we're really so grateful and happy to be able to provide that service to our community. The third program that we are also partnering with the Department of Health is their pop-up program. So these are taking small pods directly into vulnerable communities. So low-income housing developments, developments where there are many disabled and elderly people living, to go directly to them to make it easy for them to access their vaccination. So we did a pop-up a week ago, Saturday in Hempstead at a housing community. We did one at a church in Hampton Bays last week. And we're working with the Department of Health to develop a schedule to be doing 4 or so of these every week for the foreseeable future. And then, of course, there's always the second dose pop-up. So you can see this program ramps up pretty quickly. So we sort of have a mobile on-the-road team that will go out to these locations and do these vaccinations. We did our own pop-up last week with our hospital allocation after receiving permission from the Department of Health to take some of our hospital allocated doses to Peconic Landing, which is a retirement and nursing home community way at the easternmost tip of the North Fork. with an average age in their independent living community of 82 years old. And those residents weren't eligible for the federal program that vaccinated the skilled nursing home facility residents because they're in independent living. Yet, it was a huge barrier for them to get vaccinated. This was incredibly well received. Great program. We were really happy to do it and partner with the community out there, and we hope we can do more of these things in the future. So vaccination has been basically a whole nother huge program that we started to stand up in December, and have been able to assemble a team drawing on all of our assets. So many of the vaccinators in these pods are our nursing and medical students, who we've trained up how to do that. And they've gone through all this, the required Department of Health training on how to be a vaccinator. We've called upon all of our staff to do extra service and engage in these pods. There's been just tremendous enthusiasm and a real desire and willingness for everyone to help with this vaccination effort. Because of course, we all see this is one of the best pathways we have out of this terrible pandemic. So we've been quite happy to do this. We, Stony Brook Medicine team, have administered about 40,000 vaccines thus far in this program. We're really looking forward to that number even getting bigger, and are totally on top of how do we continue to staff these efforts. The pop-up efforts in particular is very appealing to our students. They really want to be in the community, connecting with the communities. And we're hoping that Stony Brook University can provide some real leadership in this regard with how do we do this well? How do we get education out? And last week, Judy Griman convened a group to discuss this. So, what are the unique contributions we can make in the vaccination arena? Other initiatives going on sort of outside of the four walls of the hospital is that we have created in our Comac outpatient location, so that's the Comac Advanced Specialty Care building, which is a large multi-specialty facility right on Comac Road. We've created a post-COVID clinic. So this is a multi-specialty team being led by Dr. Rajapet from Family and Preventive Medicine. And this is providing longitudinal follow-up in patients with the long-term impacts from COVID. So patients who 3 weeks post their acute infection are still feeling symptomatic and clinical impacts of the disease can enroll in this program. And we've brought together specialists from primary care, rheumatology, pulmonary disease, cardiology, neurology, infectious disease, mental health providers, care managers who work with each and every one of these patients to make sure they're getting access to the care they need and they're being followed. And an important dimension of this effort is also collecting the clinical information about these patients, because this is a disease we're still learning a lot about. We don't know everything about COVID or its long-term impacts. So, as an academic medical center, also doing the research to try to understand, what happens to these patients in the long term is an important dimension of this program. And we have dedicated specialists from each of those areas who've committed to be part of this initiative. And they are the thought leaders then, both for the whole organization and a resource for physicians in the community, who may or may not have the wherewithal and the time to keep up with what are the latest advances in COVID and in the treatment of these patients. This has been an incredibly successful program. We have hundreds of patients enrolled in it. Our care managers that we had hired last year as part of the formation of our clinically integrated network are keeping in touch with and helping every single patient who gets discharged from our hospital with a COVID diagnosis to stay connected back to their medical home and to make sure they have all the follow-up assessments they need to achieve the best long-term outcomes. And finally, I just want to mention, again, as an academic medical center, the research piece of COVID is critically important. And last spring, Ken Kashansky charged a group at Stony Brook Medicine to develop the Stony Brook Medicine COVID-19 Data Commons. And this is a research resource, a database of a very well curated set of more than 1,700 data elements selected for the clinical relevance in this population. And this is a huge research resource for our faculty to understand this disease, figure out its natural history, determine the best treatments, and to give us a sense of who are the patients who are most likely to develop long-term impacts of this disease and be sickest when in the hospital. So for example, one publication that came out of this data commons characterized the Stony Brook cohort from last spring using all the demographics, their clinical characterization, their hospital course, to identify what were the predictors of poor outcomes in those patients, so that when this surge came, we had more information to figure out who's going to get sickest from this infection, and how do we make sure that we're prepared to take care of all those patients' needs. The work has really served as a launching point for Stony Brook and our investigators to become leaders nationally in this kind of research. And Dr. Joel Saltz, who's our chair of biomedical informatics at the university, is now co-leading the data analytics efforts for an NIH initiative looking at this COVID infection and its long-term impacts. So we've been very happy to be engaged in also in this work, creating the knowledge about this disease so we can best meet the needs of our patients. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. McGovern and Carol. Thank you very much. Really, it's sort of mind-blowing, everything that you guys have done over the past year. And your entire, the whole team has done. I had one question, and if either of you said it and I missed it, I apologize. The governor last week talked about he was concerned the percentage of healthcare workers in hospitals was lower than he thought they'd be or wanted them to be. What percentage of our employees have been vaccinated? And for those who haven't yet been, any thought of us making it mandatory, carving out anyone who has a legitimate religious or healthcare exemption?
So we, today, as of this morning, we're at 76% of our eligible phase 1A at SBUH have been vaccinated. This week, we have targeted initiatives to go to those groups where we know the uptake has been low. So we have some analytics around that. And part of this is an education program to reach those groups. Part of it is to make sure we reach them in the first place, because some of these unvaccinated workers are in housekeeping and food service and others that we may not have been reaching with our traditional ways of communication through email and our website, et cetera. So we're literally sending the managers into those locations to talk to those groups, to offer them again an opportunity. We're running an all-day pod at the hospital this week on Thursday. There are people who cannot receive the vaccine for medical indication. There's a lot of discrepant information about the safety of the vaccine in pregnancy, although overall, I think the preponderance of evidence suggests that it is safe, but there's lots of pregnant staff, who are hesitant to get it until their pregnancy is completed. On the issue of making it mandatory, I think one of the complex issues there is that this vaccine is still under an EUA, so it's not really a fully approved vaccine. So I think the difficulty there would be mandating in the context of, how this vaccine is being delivered right now, that it hasn't been fully approved, I think might pose some logistical issues. I don't know if Susan, you want to comment on that, but I think there are some issues around that.
I don't think you can mandate it, Kevin. If it's an EUA, once it receives final approval by the FDA, perhaps that will be under consideration.
Thank you, Susan and Dr. McGovern and Carol. Any other questions for our special guest today?
Kevin?
Yes.
Mike Smith. I just want to make a comment in terms of the whole vaccination process. I think this week we're in the process of standing up a pod here on the reservation in conjunction with our health clinic, the Department of Health, Stony Brook, Southampton, as well as Stony Brook University Hospital. So I just want to commend Stony Brook for their advocacy for the Shinnecock Nation.
Oh, that's terrific news, Michael. Thanks for sharing. And I think Stony Brook, just as you guys did a great job with getting a good news story on the Peconic Landing initiative, working with the Michael and the Shinnecock Reservation, sounds like another good opportunity for us to highlight the great work of the whole team.
Kevin, may I ask a question? It's Matt Coleman.
Sure.
Doctor, just two questions, actually. The first question was, when you say 76% of the staff has been vaccinated, is that one or two vaccinations?
So 76% have received their first vaccine, and we are about 83% through the second doses. It's all about the timing. So the others have just not, their time has not come up yet, but those vaccinations will happen over the next 10 days.
Okay, and then the second question I had was went to something you talked about, going out into the community and vaccinating seniors at senior living facilities. Another side job of mine is I'm chairman of North Hempstead Housing Authority in Nassau County. I was just talking to my executive director. We're still trying to get some understanding from the county and or the town of North Hempstead as to when we're going to see vaccinations in our senior facilities. For example, we have 3 of them, about 600 residents. As you can imagine, it's a lower income group of people. They don't tend to have their own cars to get to a vaccination site. And probably 60 to 70% of them have some type of underlying condition, a lot of diabetes. So we've been trying to figure out how to get somebody in to vaccinate. And we've gotten some indication from the county and or the town that they might be doing something. How is it that Stony Brook is reaching out? And is there anything similar that you've talked with maybe North Shore or Langone in terms of in Nassau County, what they may be doing?
So the pop-up pods, which is what you're referencing, is go right to where the patients live. We're doing that in partnership with the State Department of Health. The Department of Health is selecting the locations where staffing and operationalizing those operations, but they are selecting the locations and informing us where they want us to go. But the intention is that these pop-ups, we're going to be servicing both Nassau and Suffolk County for this pop-up program for the state. And they have, a list of locations that they're investigating for feasibility, and they want to cover the geography. So I think it's coming, and I think there's a lot of interest on their part to do as many of these as the vaccine supply will permit. And again, it always gets back to supply, but that is the intention, is to get to, these vulnerable populations right where they live.
Has your team had any communication, say, with Suffolk County or Nassau County or the townships?
Well, the vaccine is coming from the state, and this pop-up program is state driven. I mean, to my knowledge, the counties haven't been given vaccine supply for that purpose. If they were, we'd be happy to partner with them too, but I think the state is really running this program.
Yeah, that's my question, because right now the only communication my staff at the Housing Authority is getting is from either we're reaching out to our local township and we're talking with folks in the county, and they don't seem to know what you're doing. So maybe that's just a place to maybe bring some other folks into the mix to make sure that the folks at the county level, who we normally talk to about things like this, we don't normally directly deal with the state about how this is going to roll out, because we've gotten no information yet about it. And that's not your fault. That's
So, I mean, I can just jump in for once. The areas, and particularly any pop-ups that we're involved in, these are 100% in essence selected by and communicated with the state players. And so what we're trying to actually do right now is to work out something that's more of a, and some of that is driven by, most of that is driven by vaccine availability. But right now we're trying to essentially work out a schedule where there's, sort of more advanced communication, but this is all selected by state players, and is obviously 100% dependent on vaccine availability as well.
No, I understand that. From my perspective, it's just frustrating that we've got a highly vulnerable population and we've got no communication. I apologize for taking a Stony Brook meeting and making it a North Hempstead Housing Authority meeting.
Don't worry about it, man. It's a good issue, and we'll try to get it on the radar screen. Who else?
Frank.
Yeah, Frank.
First, Carol, Larry, Dr. McGovern, and Dr. Krashansky, thank you for all you've done, all you continue to do, and throughout this terrible pandemic. The question I have is with regard to the fire and EMS service in Suffolk County in particular. There have been tremendous voids in trying to get firemen vaccinated. And they have been scurrying around, calling and calling and calling. Many departments getting nowhere. some getting success, and some departments where they have done it on site, I know, in the county. But there are lots of voids there, and these first responders need to be vaccinated. Is there anything we can do to fill that void? Obviously, I'm very involved in fire and EMS service.
So the rules around the allocations that come to Stony Brook University Hospital are pretty prescriptive. So, you know, the directive to the hospitals is that we must use our allocations to vaccinate healthcare workers. And what the state has said is that the pharmacies, you know, this is the current thinking, the pharmacy is going to focus on the 65 and over population, and those big state pods will be for those other workers, which would include fire, police, et cetera. 4 weeks ago, we did get some allocation directed at EMS and EMT, and we did a very large pod on Stony Brook University campus in the student union, and it vaccinated, you know, several thousand from the community, and their agencies contacted those people, and we were delighted to do that. That was a great initiative, and all those folks came back last week and got their second dose. So they were all fully vaccinated. So when we get opportunities to engage in those efforts, we are. But I think the plan now is that those workers are going to be going to the state-run pods. And as we all know, right now, there's difficult to get appointments. But again, as the vaccine supply improves, we're told appointments will be added to those locations.
Okay, so there's nothing directly that we can do to kind of address the fire and EMS service right now. Is that something that can be brought up at some level to try to help the situation? You know, these men and women are on the front line. They're out there every day, and while, you know, firemen fight fires, they go into accidents. They're in people's faces. They're constantly out there. And I know it's a big concern. And I just bring it up because it's certainly, I know if we could address it, we would be addressing it. And if it could be, you know, at least laid down on the table along the trails here, and anything we can do, it would be gratefully appreciated.
Yeah, and you know, the eligibility has been, you know, fluid, right? So fluid is the word. So because more eligibility groups get added. So, you know, back when we did that big university pod at that time, fire and police were not eligible. They were eligible if they were also EMT or EMS. And we did many. And then a few weeks ago, we did another very large pod in Riverhead. And again, we did many fire and police who were EMS, EMT, because at that time, being a volunteer firefighter without EMS, EMT was not a qualifying condition, but now it is. So I think, you know, this is on people's radar screen, and it really always gets back to supply, having the vaccine.
No. Thank you, Dr. McGowan.
Dr. Kevin, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Dr. McGovern, thank you for everything you're doing. We know how important this work is. In your opinion, how realistic is it that the nation reach a 200 million doses vaccinated, you know, by July 1st, which has been tossed around out there?
So
hate to put you on the spot.
If you're asking as a logistical issue, could enough logistics be set up to do that? You know, I think the answer would be yes. It's all about the supply. It always gets back to the supply. I think that, you know, we and everyone else I know and every other entity that's engaged in doing vaccination work would stretch ourselves as far as we possibly can to do as many vaccines as we can. And we could add way more capacity, you know, if we had the supply. So I think the logistics and the workforce is there, and it's about, will we have 200 million doses to give to people by July 1st?
Got it. It's about supply. You think that across the country, hospitals and other providers are equipped to actually get it done. We just need to get the vaccine.
Correct. I mean, just if you look back from the first week we were doing vaccinations to how we do it today, like we've become this incredibly well-oiled machine. It is so efficient. It's so fast. People are in and out of there. You know, you have to wait 15 minutes after you're vaccinated to be observed to make sure you don't have any side effects. People are in and out of that place in 20 minutes. So it's incredibly efficient. You can get a lot of throughput, and, you know, and I think folks will get, you know, a lot more clever and imaginative about, you know, venues to do this.
Chris, this is Ken. Were you asking about the advisability of getting to 200 million immunized people vis-a-vis extinguishing the epidemic? Was that the base of your question, or was it just the logistics that Peggy?
Well, the logistics, but, from what we've heard, if we get to that 200 million, 60% or so of the population, we would be at a place where we could begin truly opening up, right? I mean, that's what we've been hearing. That's what we've been told. It sounds right to me, but I'm not a doctor. But I just been seeing this lag in getting it done, particularly with the states' systems crashing, and not just this state, but other states experiencing problems scheduling people. I've seen the way some other countries have done it. I think Israel just did it by age, and it was much more efficient the way they've been doing it. I just wondering if we're going to actually get there. And it seems to me that we have the personnel to get it done. We just don't have the supply, which is a problem. But I would love your opinion on whether or not 200 million is an actual magic number, or if it's got to be something else.
I think it's based on the number immunized, assuming that 95% effectiveness of the two current vaccines. Plus, remember, there's 15 or 20% of the population who has had COVID. And if that is strong immunity, which is, the jury's out on that, but now you're getting up to 70 or 80% of people. And that is pretty much what most people would agree is herd immunity, thereabouts.
Good. Thanks for that, Ken. All right, any other questions? Well, now, Margaret and Carol and Larry, we want to embarrass you because of your great work. Stony Brook Council over the last 3 decades has infrequently issued the Stony Brook Council Medal of Honor. In fact, in the 11 plus years that I've been chair, we've only done it twice, and it was just last month. We did it to Ken Laval and John Flanagan, our state senators who retired. And so today, we want to recognize both Carol, Dr. McGovern, and Larry Zacharies for the amazing job that they have done in the past year in so many different ways. We have resolutions, official resolutions in our packets for the council members, and I'm not going to read them all, but let me just highlight again just some of the things that were done and why we want to recognize you all. So with Carol, who developed a surge plan to double the capacity of our hospital from 624 to 1,248 beds, and opened 300 additional beds, including 180 ICU beds. And then she had a fully staffed separate ER, separate and apart from the ER to keep our regular ER patients safe, creating an oxygen tank farm, and then creating so many creative solutions to generating more PPE for the overall team over at the hospital. Really, Carol, amazing work. Dr. McGovern, all of the things you just mentioned, but also in addition to taking care of the healthcare system and the collaboration that's been done, dramatically expanding the telehealth services for outpatients, the drive-through coronavirus testing site, the multidisciplinary teams that form the backbone of the overall response to COVID-19 throughout Suffolk County. And now that Stony Brook Medicine is now leading the efforts to immunize its staff, its faculty, and our residents. And Larry, we didn't hear from you in the presentation. We heard from you last time, but all of the logistical achievements that you've helped us with, returning, helping the research team get back to work and on campus to fast track its research, the return to work, the return to campus plans, that just doesn't happen overnight. That takes a lot of work, a lot of legwork, a lot of logistical work, and just the overall, everything you've done for the faculty, the staff, the students, and the broader community, and the good regional partnerships that you've established throughout the county, throughout the region, and with the state. On behalf of all 3 of you, we want to recognize you with this Medal of Honor. And just to give you 3 people who've gotten it in the past, Jack Marburger, Jim Simons, and former U.S. Senator Jacob Javits. Very infrequently granted, and usually you have to do something spectacular and special. And we all believe that, the 3 of you, really embody the entire team that's done so much great work there. If I really wanted to embarrass people, I'd put Judy on this list as well, but she would not return my emails if we gave Judy a medal too, but someday we will. But I want to make a motion to approve these 3 resolutions honoring the 3 of you with this Medal of Honor. And it's going to be seconded by Linda Arman. And I know there are no objections, abstentions, or any issues. And so it's a unanimous vote. And I think Judy actually has a picture of it or has the sample in her hands. Judy, do we have that? There it is. And that will be given to all 3 of you. And really on behalf of the council, but the whole university family, we thank you for your efforts. And remember, we're not out of the woods yet, so you got to keep on doing what you're doing, and we know you will. But a round of applause for all 3 of you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. And it is a whole team, and we have a great team. And over in that R&D pod, and there have been very challenging days, I say to the team, your reward is just stand here for a minute and watch the people walking in this building, because you're saving someone's grandmother, grandfather, father by the work you're doing. The Medal of Honor is great. Thank you so much. And but we have those other rewards too. So this has just been great work to engage in, and we are so happy and grateful to be able to do it.
Great, thank you, Carol.
I just want to thank everyone as well. It was a shock when you started speaking. I had to really perk up and listen. So thank you so much. It's an incredible honor, and I'm so humbled to be working at Stony Brook University Hospital and as part of Stony Brook.
I would do it every 2.
And
I wouldn't wait.
The fact that we have an incredible team, as Dr. McGovern mentioned, we could not do any of this without them. And they're so selfless and dedicated that it just really makes our job easier as leaders, that people are passionate about what they do every day and are making a difference in a very difficult time within our history. So just can't thank you enough. I feel incredibly humbled, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Carol. Larry, any words?
It's a tough act to follow, both of my colleagues, but I'll just reiterate the appreciation. And as Carol indicated and Dr. McGovern indicated, 1,300 times a day we get to see people coming and going, and it's the proof is in the pudding here. So if anybody'd like to come see the operation, you're certainly more than welcome. But we're doing amazing work here, and we have a great team.
Thank you, Larry. Whose ever phone is not on mute, can you put it on mute? We hear a lot of background noise. Thank you. That was quick. So again, Peg and Carol and Larry, thank you. And Judy, I know you've been in the trenches with all of them, from the beginning, using the President's Conference Room as a war room since last March. So thank you for what you have done as well. And with that, we have one last item on the agenda. We're going to get a brief update from Richard Reeder, our Vice President of Research, and Dr. Eden Figueroa on the Quantum Initiative. And it already sounds like a reason why I went to law school, because I have no idea what this is, but let's get an update.
Thanks, Kevin. And I'll start out, just give a little introduction and then introduce Eden, who will give you a lot more insight to the technology. So this is really about quantum information science. And the idea is to use the principles of quantum physics to gain advantages both in computing and in networking. And this was recognized some time ago. And it's interesting, a little over 2 years ago, Congress passed the National Quantum Information Act and committed at least $1.2 billion over a period of 5 years. We think that's going to be a very small amount. So what I wanted to do today, and also what Eden will do, is to give you some insight as to how Stony Brook is engaging here. And I want to start out by saying that this is an area where we have a lot of depth in terms of research expertise. You may have heard that the Department of Energy had a competition for quantum science centers, and 4 or 5 were awarded. Brookhaven won one of these at their center. They only went to national laboratories. And we are part of that along with a number of other institutions. So we have a number of our faculty who are engaged in that quantum science center at BNL. And the focus there really is on materials development and addressing the difficulty of noise that arises when you use these quantum principles. So already I'm getting way over my head in terms of the details here. But there's another area where Stony Brook has real leadership, not just nationally, but internationally. And this is in using quantum principles for communication, for networking. And this is where Eden Figueroa really leads our initiative. And I'm not going to say anything more than that. I'm really going to turn it over to Eden now to give you an update. Eden is a professor in our physics and astronomy department, and he's also a joint appointment with Brookhaven National Lab. And as you'll learn, he's really the key to a lot of the technology that is going to enable quantum communications. So Eden, I'm passing it over to you here. Are you able to share your screen?
Hi. Hey, Rich. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, but we can't see you. I think you'll need to share your screen.
All right. Can anybody see the screen?
We can see it.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I leave the screen a little bit like this, so then we can go back and forth if you have questions. Well, first of all, thank you very much for everybody that has been involved in keeping Long Island safe. This is really saving lives is a great thing. What I'm going to tell you today definitely doesn't save life, but I want to make the point that it could possibly change life, and this is why it's also interesting to hear about it. All right. So what I want to describe today to you, and I really want to share a lot of my excitement, is what we're doing towards developing a first prototype of the quantum internet here in the state of New York. All right, and I'm going to do this in several phases, so you see where all this is coming from. All right. So, well, as it was already pointing out, sometimes when people say quantum things, it's a little bit scary because it's not necessarily well understood what this means. So then the first part, and very briefly, this is going to be all about bottom lines, is going to be about sort of describing a little bit what this quantum internet is, and more importantly, right, why people are thinking about it so much these days. Right? So then here is a first introduction to the topic. So I want you to think about the following, and I think this is very important because particularly in this very hard 2020 year, it was the internet that actually saved literally the world, right? Because by staying connected through countries and states and small cities, we were able to keep productivity, and then so we didn't collapse, and we didn't end up in the Stone Age again, right? So there's a few bits here that are important to understand how the internet works, that then will allow me to explain you why building a quantum internet is a good idea. So first of all, there is actually 3 very important ideas of how the internet works and how it is that I can communicate to you this presentation through the internet, right? One is basically the fact that we are able to send information across many different places using pulses of light, right? So basically we just have lasers, and then what we do is we modulate the laser intensity, right? If we don't have intensity, we have a 0 logical bit. If we have some intensity, then we have a positive, a 1 logical bit. And then by doing this millions and millions of times over a second, then we can transfer a lot of these bits of information. Obviously, it's very important how to encode it. So then once this reaches your computer, you can decode it. So then you can see this presentation, and then you can communicate all these beautiful things that are happening in Stony Brook. The second thing that is super important, right, is that in the 70s and 80s, the governments across nations established a fiber network infrastructure that allowed to communicate these pulses of light in a way that we can transfer this information over long distances, right? That's the key. Light at the proper wavelength suffers very little losses in fiber. And this is why then we can communicate, in this case, country to country, even continent to continent. And lastly, something that was extremely important, right? Once you are transmitting this information, the most important part is to make this useful in the way that you can provide services that people staying at home can actually ask for the service, just as you do when you start your Zoom connection, and then the internet allows you then to connect, right? So then the internet was developed in different phases, and the first phase actually happened here in the US. There was a few little networks, the very famous DARPANET developed over there in the Boston area, and the very first primitive of the internet developed University of California and the University of Utah, right? And then from there, from these little local area networks, we start building lots and lots of things. Okay, so here's the first bit of quantum, right? What is the difference between this classical internet that of course works so well and this new generation of the internet that we want to build? Something very important, we do not want to replace the current internet. I actually believe it works very nicely. We just want to upgrade it with a new layer that will allow us to do more and more diverse things, all right? So here's the first bit. In this classical internet, the information is, as we said, communicated with lots of pulses, and the pulses contain billions and billions of photons, right? Remember, photons are the particle that compose light, but in the internet, that's not really relevant. We use millions of them to encode one bit of information. In this new form of the internet, this is a change of paradigm. Instead of just having having many, many photons per pulse, we want to have just one photon per pulse. All right, so now we're going several orders of magnitude lower in intensity. And then what we want to do is encode that information, but instead of millions and millions, just in one. And what do you gain with this? Well, as photons are quantum particles, right? They actually like to behave in this weird manner that is called quantum superpositions, which actually means that then you can place them either in two different places at the same time, or you can allow to encode different types of information at the same time, right? Here we have this nice illustration on the right that basically shows you what happens to a photon if you put it into a crossroads. Okay, so then basically the idea here is that now you can put this quantum information in these superpositions, and then you can now encode more information. So then there is two things that are very important to this. And as I've been asked to shorten this, I will go straight to the point. Because now you have single photons, then you can use this to protect and make more secure the transmission of information, because now as single photons propagate, if somebody looks at them, people at the other end of the station will know. And second, there is a bit there that is very important. If you are able to create these single photons, not basically one by one, but in pairs, right? There is this other part that is called quantum entanglement, which is very important and is completely different from anything what we do, that then allows you to send these entangled photons from places to places. And then if you make a measurement in one, then you get a response in the other one, which is instantaneous. And this is something that can be done, that can be used to transfer large amounts of information over a short period of time. All right, and then because that is very interesting, many governments across the world are very interested in building first prototype of this quantum internet that is more secure and that will allow us to transport more information over shorter periods of time. Here in the United States, 2020 was a really big year for the quantum internet. In particular, there were several documents that were produced by federal offices. For example, this one in the bottom left, the Strategic Vision for America's Quantum Networks. that was provided by the White House, where a vision for the next 10 years and the construction of first prototype of these networks was envisioned. Another thing that is very important is two of the representatives, Mr. Selden and Mr. Foster, put together the bill, right, which is called the Quantum Network Act of 2020, that looks into giving $500 million exclusively for the development of this new type of the quantum internet. Okay, now, how do we fit in here, right? As Rich was telling us, in the last few years, we have developed a program that we believe it is right now at the lead nationwide on the development of these things. What do we do here in Stony Brook? In Stony Brook, we develop this technology that allows them to construct this quantum internet, right? Some of the things that we do, here are some pictures from the lab in the basement of physics. We build these sources that allows them to make these photons, where we can encode the information in the photons, and then we can also make entangled photons that then we can distribute in fiber networks on campus and also across now to BNL as well, right? This is one of the technology developments. The second technology development is this technology that then allow you to buffer the information. Once it reaches a place, then you can put that photon into a type of memory that then allows you to then fix it. This is actually very exciting. This is what we call quantum memory buffers. And there is a lot of research behind this. I cannot tell you more about this, but say here in Stony Brook, we have a patented technology that allows to build these quantum memories. Most importantly, they operate at room temperature, which allow us to place them in different places. And we believe that some of these technologies are actually leading the US at the moment. Something very exciting that happened in 2020, we established a program together with Brookhaven National Labs to build the first long distance quantum network in the United States. This was literally built in 2020. As you know, many things were happening. This network was built. Here you see a little bit of a schematic there. You see Stony Brook on the left, Brookhaven National Labs on the right. And then that orange line that goes in between is the actual fiber. This is a commercial fiber that connects the two campuses, right? And then what we do using the technology that we have on Stony Brook, we are able to then transmit these single photons, these entangled photons to Brookhaven National Laboratories over a distance of 140 kilometers. And we can do measurements and then process the information in a way. This is a very unique prototype in the United States. I actually don't believe that anybody right now has a quantum network with the properties as this one. So then this provides us, of course, with an opportunity to keep this leadership going in the next years, right? Very recently, we made a measurement, which I think is very important. We were able to communicate a couple of quantum memories that were sitting here in Stony Brook over a distance of 158 kilometers all the way to BNL. And this is basically an experiment that is already at the level of the most advanced experiments in the world that are being performed right now in Germany, in the Netherlands, and in China. So it's something that we're very proud. And you see there at the bottom left, we have a recent paper on this that we're going to start advertising. Something very important that I think the council will appreciate is the impact that this work has had on the Long Island community and also now nationwide. These experiments that I mentioned have been covered a lot by the media, you know, starting in the summer 2020 after the first experiments were done. Our experiments have appeared in a variety of places. For example, APS, in Fox 5, there was a beautiful segment that was aired in the nighttime show. We were in the cover of Newsday, and there was also a very, very beautiful article that was written in the Discover magazine about our work, which is, you know, is generated a lot of buzz with regards to our work. This is not the end of it. Let me share with you this video. This is the former Department of Energy Secretary Dan Brulette talking about our work. Let me put it to you. This is a very brief video.
In concert with the work at those centers, we're also building on our recently unveiled blueprint for creating the nation's quantum internet. Ultimately, we aspire to connect all 17 of DOE's national laboratories as the backbone of that internet and then add universities and private sector partners to build out this breakthrough infrastructure. Here at Brookhaven, that work has already begun. Brookhaven and Stony Brook University have been developing a test bed for the quantum internet, and in July, the team achieved the longest successful quantum communications link in the United States at about 87 miles long. And importantly, they did so using commercially available telecommunications fiber.
All right. Well, as you can see there, this work has already been considered by the feds here as very important. And then I just want to point out here, this came out in January. You probably are familiar with this IEEE Spectrum, which is a beautiful journal from one of these very respected engineering societies. And there in the January issue, they talk about 10 exciting engineer milestones to look for in 2021. And they actually pick our quantum network to be one of them, right? You can see it here. They talk about quantum networking, and they talk about the network between Stony Brook and BNL and the prospect that we have to 21. And well, I think this speaks tons about the possibilities of this research and how can we leverage this to really lead this across the United States. And then in this last part of the conversation, I want to tell you a little bit what I've been doing to really expand this vision, and then going from local networks here on Long Island to now try to build a prototype of this quantum internet across the state of New York. As you heard from Rich, right, the NSF right now has a program which is called the NSF Quantum Leap Challenge Institute program, and which covers then very important developments in the area of quantum research. So here in the state of New York, historically, there have been several teams that are working on quantum technology, but there was never a vision to go ahead and merge all these efforts into a concerted vision, right? I here mention a few, right? Here in Stony Brook, we wrote conceptualization grant for this program right about a year and a half ago. Same thing was under the University of Rochester, and same thing was under the University of Buffalo, to different levels of success. The most important part here is eventually all these teams across the state of New York merge into this single vision that is called this Quantum Leap Challenge Institute in New York towards a center for scalable quantum hybrid internet. And well, you see a little bit of the storyline here. This has been a very complex merging procedure and putting together the teams. We started this operation already almost 2 years that ended up merging everything, conceptualization grants, and then going to committees in the NSF. Eventually, we were finally invited to submit a full proposal, and that was submitted just 1 week ago, February 1st, right? And then we're waiting to hear back from them. Now, what do we want to do, right? You see there in the name, New York Center for Scalable Hybrid Quantum Internet. We want to develop a lot of the technology that is necessary to build this at the scale that is needed to really do interstate quantum communication, right? So then the story there is to use the resources from many partners across the state of New York so we can really build that idea, right? And here you see all the partners that we have put together, right? What is the idea here? Many people have developed different types of technology and somehow they evolve independently. Now we are targeting all the efforts across all these, which I believe are the most important institutions in quantum in the state of New York, towards developing a first prototype of this large quantum internet. Most importantly here, you can see, apart from the universities in Suny, we also have private universities and the CUNY system, and also the bigger national labs in the state of New York, of course, BNL and the Air Force Research Lab. Now, where is this vision gonna lead us, right? What we want to do is to expand on the network that we already built here on Long Island and make it reach all the way to the city of New York, right? We also want to build another couple of quantum local area networks, one that is connected to the Air Force Research Lab, to Albany, right? Suny RF, Suny Poly, University of Albany, etc. And we want to build a third one that connects Cornell, Rochester area, and the University of Buffalo. And what is the idea of this? Of course, as the internet was developed, it was on the basis of these long local networks. We want to do this the same with quantum, and then eventually we would like to connect each of them across the state of New York to start sharing entanglement and photons, so we can do all these tasks in there. Mm-hmm. And then just to finish the conversation, how did we go about doing this, right? Thanks to Rich Reader and the Office of the Vice President of Research and the Office of Proposal Development, we were able to get a quantum seed grant program that allows to put the teams together that are working into this vision, right? And then we also have several grants that amount to a total of about $10 to $15 million with the different partners, BNL, AFRL, and some of the private sector. Another highlight of this effort is the development of a huge program for quantum smart workforce development that will use the reach of all these institutions in New York, particularly of Suny, right, to build a workforce that can work towards building this quantum internet. Most importantly, this was announced by President McGuinness in the Quantum X Lab a few months ago. We are starting a QST master program here in Stony Brook that eventually will be echoing some other institutions. And we have lots of activities programmed all across the pipeline of the emerging workforce. And then the idea is that hopefully through the reach of all our partners, we can get this going and reach several thousands of undergrads and several thousands of grad students. And hopefully also we can reach the private sector through certifications programs. So then just to give you the last idea, what is the actual size of this program that we're putting together? The last slide shows you all the different institutions and programs that are supporting this particular quantum center. You can see here some other already established quantum centers in the US that are orthogonal to what we're doing, are very interested in working with us. Very importantly, with the help of Heather Hage in Suny RF, we were able to build the so-called New York State Quantum Coalition that puts together Suny, Empire State Development, NYS Department of Labor, Financial Services, the True Authority, and the Power Authority to start building the backbone of this quantum internet. We have several national laboratories involved. Everybody that is at the forefront of quantum internet research in the world already agreed to work with us. And also very importantly, we have a very healthy industry council of 20 companies, all of them interested at different levels to participate in the construction of this quantum internet. All right, so then just to close, right, as you can see here, the last 2 years were very important into developing several different lines to develop this concept of the quantum internet. And as you can see here, this concept is very advanced, is very mature, and it's already giving its first fruits. So then, what I would like to say here is, of course, thanks so much, Rich, for supporting this initiative. It's been 2 years in which he has been tremendous into helping us. Of course, also Nina Mung from the Office of Proposal Development. Without her help here, we would have never gone into the reaches that we did with this program. And well, I thank you very kindly for your attention, and I'll very happily take your questions. Hopefully that was the 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Figueroa. Very, very impressive. One request and one question. The request, can you make sure that Rachel has your presentation? And Rachel, if you could share the slide deck with the council members, because that would be useful if you're allowed to. And Dr. Figueroa, if you said this and I missed it, forgive me, but the commercialization of the quantum internet, is this something that Stony Brook will be able to financially benefit from in terms of the leadership role we're taking in its development, or because there are so many other universities involved, it's not something that will financially benefit us in terms of patents and or any other commercialization revenues for us?
That is an excellent question. Here you see in one of these slides, we already started the path towards commercialization, right? Me and some of my students participated in this very famous NSF I-Corps program. And as a result of this participation, we started a startup company that is called QNect Incorporated. And through QNect, we have a licensing agreement in which we have already put together 3 different licenses. Some of them are at the provisional, some of them at the national level, and there's a couple of that now they're going towards the international one, right? So this is, as a consequence of this, right, we've been able to apply for STTRs and SBIR grants. In the last year alone, we got 5 of them And, you know, each of them comes back to Stony Brook in the form of 50% of the budget of these STTRs. So then this is one of the ways that Stony Brook benefits from this. And then, of course, as we've been doing this already for a couple of years, actually Stony Brook owns 20% of the company. So the hope is if we can get some really large investment in there, Stony Brook will benefit from this. Of course, you know, we have to be very careful. So then when large investors come to really put private money into this, you know, Stony Brook is a bridge, right? More than an impediment for them to actually put money into this. But yeah, you know, the program is already being built, and hopefully in the next couple of years, we'll see a lot of private investment also coming into the pipeline together with all this federal investment that is coming.
That's terrific. And I know Noelle Goddard at Connect, and excited that you have her on board with that. So good luck. Any other council members have any questions? All right, hearing none. Do any council members have any other business they want to raise? Hearing none. Maury, I think we will now adjourn the meeting, and we'll let everybody know that the next meeting date is May 3rd. Not sure if that's in person or virtual, but Rachel will let us know through email. Thank you all. And Maury, thank you for having your team with us. You got a great team, and we always appreciate it when they participate in these meetings. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you all council members, and look forward to seeing you in May.